This message comes from Sony Pictures Classics with Nuremberg. The Allies seek justice for the Holocaust. The chief prosecutor leads the trial of the century, while a U.S. Army psychiatrist battles Hermann Goering's mind. Nuremberg, in theaters November 7th.
What's good? You're listening to the Code Switch podcast from NPR. I'm Gene Demby. We are in the home stretch of one of the most closely watched local races in the country. That's New York City's mayoral election. And this race has been framed as a fight for the soul and the future of the Democratic Party. And at the center of all this hullabaloo, I can't believe I said that word. Never said that word before. At the center of all of it is the 34-year-old Democratic Socialist, Zohran Mamdani.
I will be your Democratic nominee for the mayor of New York City.
Mamdani was basically unknown to most of the city at this time last year, right? He's a state assemblyman representing a district in Queens, but he stunned the political establishment in New York and, if we're keeping it a bean, like across the country, by handily winning the Democratic primary, despite trailing in all the polls for most of the run-up to that vote to the presumptive establishment favorite, former Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Life in this city doesn't need to be this hard. But politicians like Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo want it to be this way. They care about their donors. They care about themselves. They don't care about you, the working class who keep this city running.
Mamdani has become a figure of fascination in part because of his biography, right? Like, he was born in Uganda to the acclaimed Indian filmmaker Mira Nair, and if he wins, he will be the first Muslim mayor in the history of New York City. But it's also the vibes of everything. Like, his campaign has been very millennial and Gen Z coded. Like, social media posts and slogans that focus on affordability, or I guess the lack of affordability of life in the country's most populous city. One of his pet slogans was, "Make halal $8 again," because the city's food trucks have become mad expensive. He also ran the city marathon wearing a t-shirt that read, "Eric Adams raised my rent," a little shade toward the city's outgoing mayor. Mamdani said he wants to freeze rent in the places where he has the authority to do that. He wants to make the city's bus lines completely free, and he wants to pilot some city-owned grocery stores in poorer neighborhoods that will offer lower prices than conventional supermarkets. It's these lefty beliefs that have endeared Mamdani to younger, more progressive voters who have been disillusioned with mainstream Democrats, as well as voters who traditionally, stay home in local races. But it ain't all rainbows and free buses in Zohran land. He has notably softened support from a big part of the Democratic base, namely black voters. And his consistent support for Palestinians has earned him consternation from supporters of Israel and has made establishment Dems kind of hold him at arm's length. And so today on the show, how Zohran Mamdani's upstart campaign has scrambled a lot of the racial and representational politics in the New York City mayoral race, and what it all might mean for the Democratic Party going forward.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from MIDI Health. Women's midlife health issues have often been trivialized and ignored. It's time for a change. It's time for MIDI. MIDI is covered by major insurance companies, making expert care accessible and affordable. Clinicians provide one-on-one consultations where they listen to your unique needs and offer data-driven solutions tailored for you. MIDI works to make you feel seen, heard, and prioritized. Visit joinmidi.com to book your virtual visit. MIDI, the care women deserve.
This message comes from Schwab. Everyone has moments when they could have done better, like cutting their own hair or forgetting sunscreen, so now you look like a tomato. Same goes for where you invest. Level up and invest smarter with Schwab. Get market insights, education, and human help when you need it. Learn more at schwab.com.
This message comes from MIDI Health. If you're a woman over 40 dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, weight gain, or brain fog, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. The clinicians at MIDI Health understand what you're experiencing and know how to help. MIDI Health provides specialized care for perimenopause and menopause covered by insurance. Book your visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. This message comes from the Council for Interior Design Qualification. Interior designer and CIDQ president Siavash Madani describes his fundamentals of interior design.
I think interior design is about responsibility. It's not just the way a space looks or the way a space photographs. To me, better design means functional, safe, accessible, and inclusive design.
Learn more at cidq.org/NPR. This message comes from MIDI Health. If you're a woman over 40 dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, weight gain, or brain fog, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. The clinicians at MIDI Health understand what you're experiencing and know how to help. MIDI Health provides specialized care for perimenopause and menopause covered by insurance. Book your visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
Tanvi Misra is an independent reporter who lives in Queens, in Mamdani's stomping grounds, as it turns out. And she's been covering his campaign for outlets like Politico. She's also a Code Switch alum. She was our first ever intern way back in the day. Tanvi, what's good with you? Welcome back, friend.
It's nice to be back.
So, Tanvi, Mamdani won the primary by bringing out some really non-traditional primary voters. So what was the strategy there?
The groups of voters that his campaign has gone for, they're very unlike the safe choices that other campaigns have made in the past. For example, there's this conventional idea of going after the 3 prime voters, right? Voters who have shown up in the last 3 elections, in the last 3 primaries, are a safe bet to go for, right? Because you know they'll show up at the polls, you know that they're going to vote. But he went for renters, he went for Muslim New Yorkers, and he went for those voters that are called like quote unquote low propensity voters, voters who have been sort of disaffected from the system and disconnected from the system, who are not really well represented in the political system and who are thought of as unreliable or unorganizable voters. One central part of the electorate that he went for very decisively early on in the campaign, with the help of his DSA, Democratic Socialist of America, organizers and campaign staff, was renters, right?
According to the city of New York, it's about 7 in 10 people in New York City rent their homes.
Yeah, totally. So there's that. And then there's like 40% of renters are rent burden, which means that rent is, more than half of what they're bringing in goes towards rent. And so that's the first thing you hear when you talk to someone about the kind of issues that they're facing in the city. And that was his market. And it was not a conventional choice.
You reported in Politico that Mamdani really activated the previously untapped potential that is the South Asian auntie vote. Side note, there's been some recent cringy fact-checking by people who don't seem to know how auntie is used, what an auntie is. Okay, whatever, come on, y'all. Anyway, tell me, what did you find when you were out reporting this?
Some of my reporting showed that the South Asian voters in the city, especially South Asian voters who are working class, are low propensity voters. That is a key group among them. People have sort of taken, votes of this group for granted, that they're going to always vote Democrat. But that's not actually a very obvious conclusion to make. I mean, there's just so much diversity within South Asian groups, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there's
she says with understatement.
Right. There's caste and there's class and there's religion and there's did you come in the 60s or did you come a lot after that? It's just, and then nationality, right? There's Nepalis, there's Indians, there's Pakistanis, there's Bangladeshis. And I feel like some of the more working class, newer groups of immigrants who've immigrated more recently, in more recent decades, they really do struggle in the city. And some of the low propensity aspect of it just really comes from you're hustling every day. You're just trying to kind of make ends meet. And so you don't really have time to kind of go out and, think about ideology or politics in the larger sense of it necessarily in some cases. In other cases, people are extremely well educated. They have this lived experience that has been really politicized and is very politically informed. And it's just that they don't really feel represented by the political systems. And so they don't participate in these systems. They have been told that they're not that important. Their vote is an afterthought.
Okay.
The numbers that we did have after the primary showed that turnout in those in South Asian areas, in particular areas where Bangladeshi Americans make up huge parts of the population, were way higher than they were in the 2021 election. So that seemed to suggest that this was a particularly activated part of even the South Asian electorate. And they really came out for Mamdani. And in addition to that, some of my interviews were around this. And I was talking to organizers who said that they'd never seen these aunties be so activated. I mean, they were going in the heat of the summer, which was sort of not an easy feat, physically speaking. But, they were walking miles and miles just to kind of talk to people, get out the vote, get people the literature that they needed to understand what the issues were. One organizer had told me that in and of itself signaled that we were at the precipice of something different this time around with this election.
But what did Mamdani do that was so novel that activated these voters, like the South Asian voters of New York City, who you say are typically low likelihood voters?
Well, I think one is that he didn't just get up one day and was like, oh, I should hang out with those people. People knew him already. I mean, some of the folks I talked to were tenant organizers. These were not your DSA, young, maybe professional people. These were food cart vendors, right? People who really struggled to make ends meet and who had been organizing along with their communities for tenant protections and tenants' rights for years at this point, and knew Mamdani because he had come in on these different rallies and actions that they had organized and really to them seemed to be committed to their well-being. And it's not even so much that they thought he would win. One of them told me, the food cart vendor that I interviewed for my story, said that he actually didn't think that Mamdani had a chance, but it felt worthwhile that there would be someone in the race that would put forth these issues that they so cared about.
Got it.
One of the first times that I started really I sort of sat up and was like, hey, this is something interesting, is he went out and was doing these man on the street interviews with people where he was asking them why they voted for Trump, if they voted for Trump in the 2024 election. And it was really interesting because people told him all sorts of things. Some people, the South Asians who told them they voted for Trump because they were sick of Biden's policy around Israel-Palestine. Others told them it was an affordability issue. They just weren't getting what they were promised. They just didn't feel like they were seen, and they wanted to vote for a change, right? But he then took these ideas and then made them sort of these central sort of tenets of his agenda, freezing the rent, free and fast buses, all of these things that were coming from these talking points. Just how to make things more affordable is what he keeps coming back to. And that seems to me, from my having spoken to folks, it trumps how important his identity and even as in messaging is.
Right. I was going to ask you about that, the sort of representation aspect. And you're saying that that's part of it, but that's not the bigger part is actually him sort of being on the ground and actively engaging with voters that he was trying to win over. Well, tell me, you've been talking about the way that Mamdani has energized these constituencies that have sort of felt left out of Democratic politics. But on the flip side, even though Mamdani mollywopped Cuomo in most of the city's districts in the Democratic primary, he only ran about even with him in the city's blackest districts. What is going on there?
Yeah, it's so interesting and complex. But I do think a little bit of it, at least in the primary, was name recognition, simple name recognition, right? Mamdani is new. He's a relatively new player. Cuomo has he's dynastic, right? And he and Mayor Adams is incumbent and sort of people know him. So I do think a part of it is that, there are Black voters who are homeowners, right? And they care about the freeze the rent. In sort of they're concerned about that particular proposition. This idea of you're building this wealth, right? Homeownership, as we've discussed many times on this podcast, is one of the primary ways that you are told to build wealth and to build generational wealth. And I think for many Black homeowners in the city probably think that, we've come to this point and now you're sort of changing the system. That has been something that I've read it's a huge concern. I also feel there is a generational, there's an interesting generational trend, where it does really look different depending on what age the voters are in this community. There's another thing, and this is not specifically Black voters, but I've certainly heard this in South Asian populations as well. There are very nuanced ideas about public safety. I mean, that's certainly something that's come up as a critique of him, right? That he's going to be too easy on crime. I mean, some of these people are worried about crime. I mean, it's something that's affected them personally. There are certain South Asian neighborhoods where, crime was a problem. And so they developed these ideas and relationships with the NYPD, with the police, that have persisted over time. And so when someone comes and challenges that, they're skeptical of that. That's one thing that I'd heard of. And I certainly think that's true for certain older generation of Black voters, right?
That sort of material difference, right? Like homeowner versus renter. Well, like that split in New York City among all groups, I'm assuming, but particularly among Black people, is probably old folks versus young folks. So an appeal like we're going to freeze the rents is going to be much more, is going to land much more favorably to young people who are renters than it would to old people who are homeowners.
Oh, absolutely. There is a community of homeowners that has very different politics than renters. And that's just simply a material, contextual difference in how they are going to vote in an election. That's going to make a huge difference. So I do feel like there are all these aspects of your identity and how you move through the world that, in a very material way kind of inform your politics. And you're seeing that play across. And that's why it's so hard to kind of predict.
Yeah, there's a way that older Black voters are under-considered as a conservatizing force in Democratic Party politics. And not just because of ideological reasons, but for the material reasons you just pointed out, right? When we talk about the Democratic Party's base, these are folks who come out in every election in a lot of cases, right? Whether it's a local race, whether it's a national one. And because of these very strong partisan ties, you alluded to this, they are the party's institutionalists, right? They side with incumbents, right? So this is like a thing that is true in Democratic Party politics in a lot of places, that the sort of institutionalists, the institutionalizing force, are the old Black folks.
Absolutely. I think that is so true here. I really do feel there is this skepticism of someone who's trying to, the perception is that he's trying to completely change the system or sort of turn the system on its head. And that is not that leads to so much uncertainty and unknown. And I do think that there is a generation of voters in the Black community, as you said, institutionalists. But I also feel, this was something that the South Asian organizers I spoke to said they had trouble with before the primary in particular, was some of these sort of gatekeepers and institutionalists in the community who are like, well, we don't know this guy. We don't know what he's trying to do. We've seen the politics of the status quo before, and we know how to engage with it. It's what's familiar to us. And so, we're sort of more comfortable with sticking with that, with the sort of the safety of that.
All right, so Tommy, Mamdani has faced Islamophobia throughout his campaign. At one point, there was this campaign mailer from a political action committee that got sent out. And that campaign mailer featured a photoshopped image of him with his skin darkened, his beard lengthened, rocking traditional Muslim dress. And it framed him as an enemy of the NYPD and an enemy of capitalism and an enemy of Israel. But that stuff has really ratcheted up in the last couple of weeks, right? There's been a lot of more explicit messaging from around the country, like from Vice President J.D. Vance, who made comments on social media about Mamdani not understanding who the real victims of 9/11 were. Andrew Cuomo, who is Mamdani's main rival in this election, who was the person that he upset to win the Democratic primary, was on a podcast where the host said that Zohran Mamdani would be, quote, cheering if there were another 9/11, to which Andrew Cuomo chuckled and said, well, that's another problem. And so, lots of, Muslim baiting, barely dog whistling, very wink, wink, nudge, nudge, pretty explicit nods to the fact that Zohran Mamdani is a Muslim and he would be the first Muslim mayor of New York City. So how have the folks you talked to in New York felt about that kind of characterization of Mamdani?
Yeah, I think, God, that is a great question. I think it's certainly been really kind of, I think, striking, even for people who are sort of so used to it or who expect this. So I think there's two things. I think Islamophobia sells. One of the recent polls I saw was that the lead has come down to just 10 points between Mamdani and Cuomo. And I do think
that's because Adams dropped out, right?
Well, that's because Adams dropped out. Also, I think a part of that might also be a little bump, Islamophobia bump. Maybe that's like a pretty cynical view of it, but I would not underestimate how much especially in the recent weeks, the kind of like Islamophobic attacks that Cuomo's put forth and others have put forth, that they are having some traction among people who are already maybe on the fence about Mamdani, right? So that's one thing. I do feel, though, there are also people in his base who recognize this. What he is going through is something that people see, in their communities. They have gone through it themselves. And so it might even galvanize, it might have sort of the reverse effect in some ways of also getting more people out who are likely to vote for him. So I do think that it can cut both ways. Again, like I'm not really sure how it's going to play out, but yeah, it's certainly potent. Now, I just add one thing about that poll that I mentioned, the recent poll about Cuomo closing in on Mamdani and the lead only being 10 points. Something that was interesting about that poll that I wanted to just point out was that one of the questions said, is your vote, in both cases, is your vote more about voting for Mamdani or against Cuomo in Mamdani's case? And 79% or 80% said it was for Mamdani. When you flip that question and you asked Cuomo voters, is your vote more about voting for Cuomo or against Mamdani? Plurality, 40%, said that it was for Cuomo, and almost the same amount, 39.88%, said it was against Mamdani.
Wow.
Which is really interesting, right? In my theory, I do think there's some of that like Islamophobia bump coming up here with the against Mamdani, or like the socialism scare, the Red Scare aspect of all of this is coming up in that big against Mamdani percentage. But again, I'm curious to see how that unfolds over the next couple of days.
Tommy Misra is an independent reporter in New York City. She's reported on the Mamdani campaign for outlets like Politico, and she's a Code Switch alum. Thank you, Tommy, for coming on and rocking with us. Appreciate you.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
All right, y'all. That is our show. You can follow us on Instagram at NPR Code Switch, all one word. If email, that's more your thing, no problem. Ours is codeswitch@npr.org. And subscribe to the podcast on the NPR app or, wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Code Switch newsletter by going to npr.org/Code Switch newsletter. And just a reminder, sign up for Code Switch Plus. It's a great way to support our show and public media. You might have heard something about that. We could use your help. And you get to listen to every episode of Code Switch sponsor-free. So please go find out more at plus.npr.org/Code Switch. This episode in your ears right now was produced by Xavier Lopez. It was edited by Leah Donnella. And we would be remiss if we did not shout out the rest of the Code Switch massive: Christina Kala, Jess Kung, Daya Mortada, Virlin Williams, and B.A. Parker. As for me, I'm Gene Demby. Be easy.
This message comes from KeyBank. You should never feel like you're leaving business decisions to chance. Try a banking relationship that helps you turn industry insight into industry advantage. Reimagine business as usual. KeyBank opens doors. Key.com/B2B.
This message comes from Mattress Firm. Losing sleep when your partner tosses and turns? Mattress Firm sleep experts can match you with a Tempur-Pedic mattress designed to absorb motion for deeper rest. For the great sleep you deserve, visit Mattress Firm. They make sleep easy. Support for NPR and the following message come from Rosetta Stone, the perfect app to achieve your language learning goals no matter how busy your schedule gets. It's designed to maximize study time with immersive 10-minute lessons and audio practice for your commute. Plus, tailor your learning plan for specific objectives like travel. Get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off and unlimited access to 25 language courses. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.